All right, well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. People can just jump on as they need to, and I'm going to give you just like I said, kind of an overall. My name is Allie Rhodes. I'm the Arizona chapter director. I'm also the Early-Onset chapter director. I have a son who has FSHD. He was diagnosed when he was 6. He is now 18. He's been in a wheelchair since he was about 13. And we started down this road to try and get him his driver's license when he was about 15 and a half. And he just now sort of doesn't have his license completely yet, but he's there. It's at DMV. It's just kind of the paperwork's going through the process right now. So it was a long process. There was some pushback that I got from the state. So I'm just going to kind of go through the process that I went through with my son. Again, I'm in Arizona, and things may differ a little bit depending on what state you're in. But the program, vocational rehabilitation, is a federal program and is managed by each state. So everything should be about the same. Every state may manage things a little bit differently, but you can look into their policies and see where it differs. But I'm just going to kind of walk you through what we went through. I am not an expert in vocational rehabilitation. I don't work for the DMV. I'm just going to give you our experience and how we kind of pushed back against the system and got it done. And now he got his van and his license. So hopefully I can give you guys some tips and tricks, at least make you aware of the program, and then you can tackle it however, whatever avenues or that you need to within your own state. This is being recorded, so I just want to let you know it's being recorded. I'm going to go through a short presentation. I'm just going to kind of give you the policies and things. But if you have questions while I'm going, please just interrupt me and ask questions as we're going. I kind of want to make this as conversational as I can. So just if you have a question or I'm not being clear enough about what the process was, just, please raise your hand or just interrupt me and we can discuss it. I hope you'll have lots of questions that I can answer. And if I can't, I do have some contacts within the vocational rehabilitation community that I can ask those questions to and maybe get back to you with. So again, I'm not an expert. I'm just going to kind of share with you with my experience, and I hope that my experience will help you or one of your loved ones get the vehicle, because it really makes a difference as far as independence, as we all know. So with that, I will get started. Okay, this is my son Sam, and this is the vehicle that we just got. Like I said, he's had it for about a month now. He is licensed now, and he passed the test, and we're just waiting for the vehicle, the license to go through DMV for him to get the actual physical license. So these are the policies that govern vocational rehabilitation. It is, like I said, a federal program that's through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The Arizona state policies that I'm going to go through with you, like I said, they are Arizona policies, but every state should have their own policies, and they should be very similar. They may have different numbers, but if you contact your vocational rehabilitation department or you do a search on the internet, you should be able to find the policies that govern modified driving and a modified license. So this is the process that we went through. Now, again, bear in mind that he was 15 and a half years old when he started this. So he didn't know how to drive at all. So he had to go through learning how to drive as well as learning how to drive an adaptive vehicle. If you are older and you've already had a driver's license and you've been driving for a while, the process might look a little bit different, but it's going to be very similar. So the first thing you have to do is you have to be accepted into if you want them to help you pay for the modification, which is very expensive, you have to be accepted into the vocational rehabilitation program. So the first step you're going to have to do is contact your vocational rehabilitation office and get accepted as a client into the vocational rehabilitation program. Vocational rehabilitation program is just a program that helps people with disabilities find employment and obtain or maintain employment. So if you're already employed, it doesn't exempt you from vocational rehabilitation if you need, or this program, if you need a vehicle If something has changed with your medical condition, you need a vehicle to maintain your employment. Again, my son, he was a student, a high school student. He hadn't been employed. He didn't know how to drive. So we started the process from scratch. The other key thing is the vehicle isn't for overall independence, is to get to and from work. So the only way they'll help you pay for the modification if it is tied to employment. If you just say, I need a vehicle to go to doctor's appointments or the grocery store, they're not going to touch you. So I emphasize that when you talk with your vocational rehabilitation counselor, make sure that you emphasize that it is work related. The first thing you're going to need is you'll get a driving evaluation, and I'll talk more about that. Then you have driving training. And again, my son, he not only had to learn how to drive a vehicle, but he had to learn to drive a modified vehicle. So his training was a little bit longer because he was learning how to drive. If you already know the rules of the road, you would just need the training to learn how to drive the modified vehicle. You do have to purchase the vehicle. And I'll go into that in more detail on what their requirements are for the vehicle. You pay for the vehicle, and then they will help pay for the modifications. The modifications to access the vehicle, like the ramp, and also the modifications to actually drive the vehicle. The modification depends on your disability. Like my son is pretty severely affected. He's in a wheelchair. He can't raise his arms very high. So his modification is called the high-tech modification, where he drives with a joystick. There's a variety of modifications out there, hand controls and things like that. It all depends on your ability and how severe you are with FSHD. But you do have to purchase the vehicle. They'll pay for the modification, and then you learn how to drive. They'll modify the vehicle. You learn how to drive on your car. And then you also have to insurance. I'll go into insurance a little bit because it's a little bit tricky, because the vehicle is worth a lot more than just a standard vehicle, right? So this van, for instance, he has a Toyota Sienna. The base price of the Toyota Sienna is about $40,000, but with all the modifications, it's worth up over $100,000. So you have to make sure that your insurance will cover the extra. Some insurance requires you to get a rider that covers that. Other insurances, like I'm former military, so I have USAA. And USAA, I'm fortunate that they deal with a lot of veterans that have disabilities. So they cover it without an additional cost, but not all insurances, I'm told, do that. So you just want to be aware that there is that additional cost probably for insurance. Then, of course, you have to pass the driving test, just like with any other. So if you already had your license, then you'd have to pass an additional test to be able to drive with a modified car. So I went over that real quick, and I'm going to go into each one in more detail and talk about the policies. But are there any questions right now before I go deeper into this? So this is the applicability for vocational rehabilitation. And again, this is the Arizona policy. Again, I think most other states would have something very similar. Again, you have to be a client in a vocational rehabilitation. And this is where you have to be actively engaged in VR services to get a job, obtain a job, or maintain a job. So it's tied to employment. Then you have to get a prescription from your doctor that says you have a medical condition that requires adaptive driving. So FSHD, if you're have any kind of limitations, drop foot, or anything that prevents you from driving a standard vehicle, you would have to see your doctor. They would have to write a prescription. It's called a prescription, but basically write a letter that says, yes, they have this condition. They're eligible for an adaptive vehicle. And then you have to make sure that you don't have any contradiction as far as you don't have any other medical conditions like seizures, or you're not taking any kind of medication or anything like that prevents you from driving. Basically, your doctor's going to say that outside of the FSHD, because just having FSHD does not, limit you, but if you're taking some sort of medication that causes you to fall asleep or anything else, then you have to make sure that that you're eligible to drive in that regard. If you have FSHD, you do have the disability that prevents you from driving if you're severely affected a normal vehicle. And this gets a little bit tricky as well, that you can't utilize any other transportation method. So like if you live in a big city and you get to and from work by getting on a subway, and that subway is handicap accessible, they may or may not approve you for the adaptive driving. Again, that's something that you would have to talk to your vocational rehabilitation counselor about. And every circumstance is going to be a little bit different. Here in Arizona, we don't have a robust public transportation system. So that was a pretty easy fit for us. But for other places, you would have to talk to your vocational rehabilitation counselor and see what fits or what the circumstances are for your particular situation. You have to possess a current driver's license or a permit. So for like my son, he had to take the written test and get a driving permit just like everybody else does. So he took the written test, he passed it, he got a permit, he was eligible to drive. Again, if you've already been driving, you already have your driver's license, now you're just progressing enough with your FSHD that you may need a modified vehicle. You already possess that knowledge and you already have that license. So that's a step. You just have to provide them with a copy of your license. And then eventually, again, like I said, you have to purchase the vehicle. Questions before I go on? Okay, this is a video of Sam driving. Again, he has a high-tech vehicle. So he drives with a joystick. So he drives with his right hand with the joystick. If you notice in his left hand, he has a button that he pushes, and that manipulates the blinkers, the washer, the windshield wipers, the horn, everything else that you might need. He presses with his other hand like a button, and he drives with the joystick. So I'm just going to show this video real quick. This is a video I took of him driving down the street. And you'll see that as he moves, manipulates the joystick, the steering wheel actually turns. He pulls the joystick back, it brakes. He turns it from side to side, it steers it, and he pushes it forward, it accelerates. And you see he's driving in traffic, he's doing very well. He caught on pretty quickly. He's in traffic. The other thing, he does drive from his wheelchair. So he's got an easy lock system that's in the driver's side. He just drives up the ramp, drives into the easy lock, it locks it down. He has the seat belt is always across him because he can't grab it and pull it. So it's always latched in. He just kind of drives up underneath the seat belt. He locks himself in. He has to do a short calibration every time he starts it. There's a box, and I'll show you. You can't see it in this picture on the left-hand side, where he starts the vehicle, where he puts it in drive and gear. And then he does a short calibration. He moves the joystick left and right just to calibrate it, and then he's good to go. Questions so far?
I've got a question.
Okay.
Can you do this to a used vehicle, or does it have to be a brand new vehicle?
So I'm going to get into that in a minute, but the answer is it can be a used vehicle, but it has to meet certain requirements. Like it has to have less than 50,000 miles on it and be in good working condition, because again, it costs a lot of money for them to pay to modify it. So they don't want to put a lot of money into a vehicle that has a short life, so to speak. So they're not going to modify a vehicle that has over 50,000 miles on it, basically. Okay. So this vehicle that Sam got, it is a used vehicle, but it only had 1,000 miles on it. So we were lucky enough to find a used vehicle. So it was a year old, only had 1,000 miles on it. It was already modified with the ramp. It had the kneeling system, the side load ramp and the kneeling system. So we bought the vehicle. So really, because it depreciated in a year. So we bought the vehicle, and then they shipped it from Arizona to Maine to put this high-tech joystick controls into it. Again, depending on when your evaluation, that will tell you when you get your evaluation what sort of equipment you need. There are some that are just hand controls, or you kind of lock your wrists in and it helps you, if you can lift it up high enough, but you can still use your arms. So there's a lot of different modifications. And that's where that evaluation is going to come in, and they'll tell you exactly what you need. He's young. He's pretty severely affected. And again, they're looking down the road that, he's probably going to need joystick driving for quite some time because he's so young. Again, it may be different for every person depending on your ability and what the severity of the FSHD is. Any other questions? Oh, okay, so this is the vehicle modification. So you have to have an assessment that says, okay, you do need a vehicle modification, and this is the type of modification that you need. They will write, again, what they call like a prescription, but basically they will write, once you go through the assessment, the physical therapist, he'd had a recreational physical therapist that gave him the assessment. It's a two-part assessment. It's a cognitive assessment. Basically, you have to pass like a test. It's a pretty basic test. And then they look at your physical attributes and what you can and cannot do. And then based on that, they recommend to vocational rehabilitation what type of modification you need for your vehicle. And again, you have to be engaged in VR services. The meet the economic need, that varies widely, and there's some manipulation that can go on. So again, talk to your vocational rehabilitation counselor. Sometimes it's just if you're on a certain insurance, you automatically meet economic need, and again, that varies by state. But I would talk to your vocational rehabilitation counselor, and they'll let you know what the requirements are. You have to have driver's license, like I said, and that it is approved, and then insurance. And I talked about that already. You have to prove that you're able to pay for the vehicle and that you're able to pay for insurance, because that's what you have to pay for. Either you get the vehicle financed just like a normal vehicle, but again, you only pay for the base vehicle. They pay for all the modifications. So it's a $40,000 van, you pay for the $40,000 van, and you finance that part of it, they pay for the modifications. But you have to prove that you can pay for the vehicle, the payments, and for the insurance, and that you don't have alternative transportation, and that you need this to get to your job. And then the vehicle requirements, the vehicle has to be registered in your name. You can't have a lease vehicle, you have to own the vehicle. It has to have less than 50,000 miles on it. There is like a caveat here: if it's 50 to 75, then it has to be inspected. But again, if you're gonna put a large amount of money into a vehicle for the modifications, then you want something that's going to last a long time, because there's only one, you can only get one vehicle in your lifetime. So for instance, my son, he's 18 years old now. He got this vehicle. He's going to have to drive that vehicle for a very long time because it's very expensive. So they're not going to pay for you to get a new car every 4 or 5 years, right? You're going to drive this car until it doesn't drive anymore. So you need to make sure that you have a vehicle that has a long life in it. Also, the other expenses that are tied to this vehicle, the insurance it may be more, and you have to take it in every 500 hours. Like for my vehicle, because it's a high-tech vehicle with a joystick, he has to take it in every 500 hours and get it recalibrated. And the recalibration is about $180 an hour. They said it doesn't take more than a couple hours. So every 500 hours on the vehicle, he has to take it in and pay, $300 or $400 to, basically it's a SIM card. They pop out the SIM card, they make any updates to it and put it back in and make sure everything's working right and it's still calibrated correctly. It may vary based on what kind of modification. If you just have hand controls, it may not be that frequently. It may be every 2,000 hours. I'm not sure, but they'll let you know. So there is a little bit of extra cost involved in that as well. I will tell you, I had to go through quite a bit to get him his license. I actually had to go, I went to court. I actually went to court with the state twice because basically they're saying he doesn't need it. You know, he's 16 years old. He doesn't need a car. But he was about to graduate high school and he was looking for a job. So I went to court. I fought it. I lost. I contacted my state representatives and I had them, they were like, well, this is crazy. He's about to graduate. He went to a technical school, a polytechnical school. He had his drone pilot's license. He has his audio engineering certificate. He was ready to be employed at a high school. So they wrote a letter on our behalf to the Department of Economic Security, which is oversees, and the Department of Education oversees the vocational rehabilitation program. They were like, you need to reconsider this. They still said no. I elevated it again to the federal level. And then finally, when he was about to graduate, because it takes a long time, when he was about to graduate his senior year, they said, yes, he can go through the process. Again, we've been doing this for about 2 years now. He just now got his license. So it was a very long process. If you're an adult, you already have your license, you have need, if you're in a job and you need to get back and forth to work, it shouldn't take that long. You shouldn't have to fight the system the way we did, but we did and we won. Surprisingly, I don't know. I can't tell you what was the magic bullet that they finally said, okay, maybe they just knew I wasn't going to go away and I wasn't going to give up. I don't know, but eventually they said, all right, fine, we're going to start this process. And they did. And now he has taken a couple college classes and he's looking for employment and he's trying to get out there and be independent. So I would say if they say no at the beginning, persistence pays off. Get into the policies, make sure you know, and that you're following all the policies and keep fighting and get people involved that can help you.
Ellie,
So
you had said that one quick question. You had said that it's just one car per lifetime. So Sam being 18. So, what happens when he's 35?
So I don't know that yet. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But they said only one is allowed per client. We'll see. I don't know. Either he'll have to figure out how to fund this himself, or maybe we go back, or he goes back, and I don't know. Yeah, the policy does say only one vehicle per client for a lifetime. So I don't know. I have heard that people have gotten a second car, like if they've had it for a long time, like 15 years or something, they've gotten a second one, but that's not what the policy says. I also know of through adaptive program that Sam did, some folks that have spinal cord injuries, they already had their license. They couldn't get through vocational rehabilitation because they were college students, but they were able to find a used vehicle that was already modified. And then they just got their doctor to sign off that form that says that they are able to drive and they don't have any contradictions that keep them from driving and that they have muscular dystrophy. He just filled that out. They took it to the DMV. They had their car. They had the adaptive. There's a special person that gives you your driving road test, and they got it and they kind of skipped all the other stuff. But with Sam or somebody young that's never driven, it's pretty impossible to do that because I can't teach him how to drive. Like I couldn't get the modified vehicle because it was $100,000, and I'm not qualified to teach him to drive a modified vehicle because I don't know how to drive a modified vehicle. So every situation is a little bit different. But I know that if you can find a used vehicle and it fits your needs and it's in good working condition, you can skirt the system a little bit. You can just get your doctor to sign it off and take it down there. And if you can pass the road test with a modified vehicle, then they'll give you your license. However, if it's like a large sum of money, if it's going to be $100,000 or more, and you can't afford that, vocational rehabilitation is the way to go. Or you don't know how, if it's such a complicated system like Sam's that you can't teach yourself how to drive, or you don't know anybody to teach you to drive, you need to go through this process.
And can you drive the car, or only Sam can drive the car?
So I can drive the car. It has a chair, or just like a normal chair that you can remove and replace. So if I want to drive the vehicle, I put the chair in there, like I just push up the ramp and it locks in. And then there's a knob on the bottom of it that I have to do some things to change it so that it drives with the steering wheel, but I do those things. The only thing I have to do is I still have to start it and I have to shift it with that control panel, but everything else works exactly the same. I just use the accelerator, the brake, the steering wheel. I can manipulate everything the same way you would a normal car. And then I can pull that seat out, put it back, and then Sam can pull in there and then drive it. So yeah, you can drive both ways. But either way, like if okay, go ahead.
Sorry, you may not know the answer to this one, but then the self-driving cars, the electric cars that are coming along at a progressive rate, did they talk to you about that and what that looks like for the disability market, with it making it more accessible for people to get cars that, you know, will do more for you while you're driving?
So I do know two people, one that has a spinal cord injury and one actually that has FSH. But they can walk, but they the FSH guy, he drives a Tesla. So he can get in and out, but then once he's in there, he can kind of program it. But and then I know another guy that has a spinal cord injury, same thing, he has a Tesla, and then he just loads his chair in the back. He has hand controls, but he can just touch it. Right now, as far as I know, you can't, because I think the law is you have to be able to take over if something goes wrong with the self-driving. And if you can't take over because of your disability, then they're not gonna, but maybe in the future. But right now, you can't just do a self-driving car unless you can take over and drive it.
Yep.
That's my understanding.
Yep, makes sense.
But
Right.
the one guy who has FSH, he's testing it, like he's in some sort of partnership with Tesla, and he's sort of testing it with disabilities and giving like feedback to Tesla. So I would hope, I don't know how, what the
Well,
timeline is.
that's a great thing to get into. That's what we should be exploring. Of, do they need more people to test drive these
Right.
as
Right, exactly. But it's a Tesla, so it's a car. Like Sam can't fit in that car. He needed a big van, right? So it all depends on what your level of mobility is, on which car you modify. And so this is a picture of the ramp that comes out. It looks normal, like a normal, just handicap van. And this is a picture of the computer screen that I was talking to you about. This is how he starts the vehicle and how he puts it in gear. Again, if I'm driving the vehicle, that's how I have to start it and how I have to put it in gear as well. But then everything else, after I get it in there, I can manipulate the car per normal. I would say if you are thinking about that you need an adaptive vehicle, that you pursue this. And again, if they tell you no at first, try again and keep fighting the system until you get what you need. Because as you know, in the disability world, they always tell you no, they always tell you it's impossible, they always tell you can't do it, blah, 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 blah. And you just have to stay on them and say, yes, I can, I need this, and stay persistent and get into the policies. Because they told me like, oh no, we don't, initially they said, oh no, no one under 18 can get this. And I'm like, it doesn't, there's no age requirement in the policy. Show me in the policy where it has an age requirement. And they couldn't. There was no age requirement. They were just sort of saying, well, we've never done it before, so we don't think we can do it. So you know how that goes. Just because it's never been done doesn't mean that it's right or correct or it can't be done. So if you need an adaptive vehicle, I would say get in contact with your voc rehab person and get enrolled in the program, or start shopping for a car and get your doctor to sign off on it. It does get pricey though. It does get very pricey.
Hi, Allie. I have a question. This is Marissa Spain speaking. I was wondering, I live in Michigan. I'm in the process of getting an adapted vehicle myself. I'm just about 27 years old. And I've been in this process for about 18 months now. So I was wondering how long it took you and your son to obtain the van. And I'm definitely identifying with what you're saying about them just kind of making up policies out of thin air.
So are
And
you in the Voc rehab program?
yes, yeah.
Okay. So it took, gosh, I'm trying to, because again, we tried and then we went to court a couple times, and it's been probably about a year since they said, yes, you can do it, because then he had to go get the evaluation, and that takes time. Then he drove in their modified vehicle, because again, he had to learn how to drive. And if you already know how to drive, it'll shorten it. But he had to learn, the rules of the road and when to change lane, all the things that you have to learn when you start driving, right? So he drove in their modified van. I think he needed, and again, our state required 30 hours of driving. So he had to drive at least 30 hours with an instructor because he didn't have a license before. So that took some time. Then once they said, okay, he's able to drive this, he's learned how to drive. Now we went out and purchased the vehicle. We purchased the vehicle, and then they shipped it to Maine because it's a high-tech modification. And that took about, I think they told us it would take 8 weeks, and it ended up taking about 12. And then he got the vehicle back, and then he had to drive so many hours in his vehicle. Like, he had to go in and they had to make sure that the easy lock was in the right place and that he could reach everything. So that took some time. And then he had to drive with his instructor for another maybe 6 or 8 hours. And then she gave him the road test, and then he passed. So it was about I don't know, once they said yes, it was about a year process.
Yikes.
So do you know what's holding yours up? Why it's been 18 months?
So yeah, that's another reason I wanted to comment. Was I wanted to tell people the tidbit that I learned that really, I think, got the process going again for me, was to contact the client assistance program. Every state voc rehab agency is mandated to have one. So if you're like getting stuck in the process, in Michigan, it's called MRS, Michigan Rehabilitation Services. So if you're getting stuck at any part in the process, I'd say, like, don't hesitate to reach out to them, because I was in like a 6 or 7 month period where we were just like circling, where I had been made eligible for services, but they were just like, I don't know what was going on. They kept needing like more documentation and more this and that before they ever and I got, they wrote up my individualized plan for employment without anything about the vehicle in it. And that's why I had originally come to them in the first place. So after that, that's when I got the client assistance program involved. But yeah, I guess, like you said, if they tell you no, just don't accept that. And that's a good way to not, is to get them involved, because my advocate had like one meeting with them. And after that, they sent me to the driver's rehab place to get all the evaluations and stuff. And that's been going for like the past 6 or 7 months. So we're at the bid stage, and that's been taking like 2 months for some reason. I have no idea why. I think I'm really close, but I've been saying that for like 3 months. So
Right. So again, just like with everything, got to stay on them, like call them all the time, just be the biggest pain in their ass that you can imagine,
yeah.
because it's going to sit on somebody's desk and they're not going to get it done. But that's a good point you bring up. So when you become a client with vocational rehabilitation, they write an individual plan of employment for you, and the driving has to be part of that plan. They have to approve that, and that's what we went to court over, to put that in his plan. But once it gets in there, then it's just a matter of keeping the ball rolling, right?
Right. Yeah. I haven't gotten a new plan written up yet, because yeah, the management of the branch I'm going through is, and it's weird, like each state makes sense that they might have different policies, but like it seems like even each branch might have like regional different policies. It's really weird. They don't really seem to know what they're doing, which is frustrating. They keep telling me that I'm like the first case like this they've had, and I'm like, that cannot be true.
Well,
Like, we
that's
got
the
a
same.
quote for this van for $106,000. Like, there's no way.
Right. Right. I mean, it's the same thing that I've heard too. Like, they're not used to dealing with people who are cognitively capable, but just are in a wheelchair. They're really not. Like, they would always say, well, yeah, this is, I just talked to his vocational rehabilitation counselor today, and she's like, this is the first time I've ever done this. Like, it's not a normal thing that they
Yeah,
do.
that's what
It's
mine
just
keeps saying
not.
as
And you
well.
have to kind of lead them by the nose and say, I know the policy and why isn't this, and just stay on them, because
Yeah.
they're just not used to dealing with people that like have muscular dystrophy and they're completely capable of driving and having a job and doing all these things. They just happen to be in a chair or happen to have some mobility issues. They're just really not used to dealing with that. So just be the squeaky wheel.
Which is so unfortunate, because that means that their tactics to try and make you give up usually work.
Right. And they
It's
do.
so
I mean, yeah.
awful.
And the other thing about vocational rehabilitation, I mean, they've been good to me, but also they'll try and, kind of pigeonhole you into a job that you don't, like, you're more capable of doing. Just because you're in a chair doesn't mean you're not capable of doing so much more. They did it with my son so many times. I'm like, no, like, he has these certifications. He's a very capable kid. He's not gonna, it's just not, they're just not used to dealing with people, I think, that are like us.
Yeah, I definitely get the vibe that they're trying to make me give up. Or I was employed on intake, but my situation, much like the guy that puts his chair in the back of his car, I have like a little like crane lift that I put my portable wheelchair in the back of my car. But like, I'm progressing and I needed to get a custom power chair, and of course that can't fold up and go in the back of my car because it weighs 400 pounds.
Right.
And so when I was looking to get that's when I started this process of trying to get the van. And I've had that chair for about 6 months now, and I still can't take it out of my house or to work.
Oh,
And I'm still like, it's getting really dangerous for me to stand up and walk, and really hard to pull my 60-pound power chair out of the trunk of my car. And I'm just like, so done. But they're kind of just like, well, you were employed on intake and you are making this work, so why do we need to
right.
help you, is the vibe I'm getting. And I'm like, do you
And
know what the word progressive means?
you've already gotten your evaluation, right? Your driving evaluation.
Yep, we got the evaluation.
So
They
if
sent
they
a
said that you need
prescription
this,
out.
if they said this is what you need, then I think it's just a matter of lighting a fire under the right person. And you know what? I went all the way up. Like, I went all the way up to
Yeah.
the state level, and I was going to the federal level. So I would say, if you are not getting what you need from your counselor, go to their supervisor. If you're not getting anything from their supervisor, go to the regional supervisor. Just keep going up the chain until you find someone that can get some action done, because that's what we just kept going up and up and up until, because everybody was saying, yeah, this just makes sense. I don't know why. Well, then point me to the person who can tell me why, because
Right.
nothing in the policy, says what you're telling me. So, if you can't explain it, point me to the person who can.
Yeah,
And if they're not, if
unfortunately,
it's sitting on somebody's desk, then you need to say, like, I need to get to work, and it's dangerous for me to get to work the way I'm going, and so you need to
yeah,
figure it out.
unfortunately, I think it's the upper management. My counselor is great, really, really doing her hardest, doing her best. I think it's unfortunately the upper branch management that's like, because it's such a big purchase, needs to go up the chain. I think it's the up the chain that's given the issues, which is why I reached out to the client assistance program, because I was just like, I'm done doing this by myself. And that's been really great. If anyone's having struggling, I would highly recommend, because they're like pseudo lawyers.
Well, good. Yeah. Find whoever you need, to help you out. I tried to get, Congress people involved, and it helped a little, but they can only put so much pressure. But sometimes, you get a letter from your state Congress, your representative, they'll be like, oh, dang, maybe I need to look into this a little bit. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're there for. So, I would encourage you to do that, or keep going up the chain until they figure it out, because it just seems like, yeah, like you're saying, they're spinning their wheels. Everything's in place. Why isn't this going forward? Right.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Well, I'm really encouraged by the joystick thing. Is really cool. I didn't know that was a thing, and that's really encouraging. That basically I'll never lose the ability to drive. So that's awesome.
Right.
given that funding is in place.
Right. It like I said, it is expensive, and your insurance is a little tricky. But again, when you talk to your insurance, they're not used to dealing with vehicles like this either. And so they were like, oh no, you need to do this. Like, you need to just, again, I had to go up the chain in insurance as well. I was like, I need to talk to a manager or supervisor or something, because I know that this is the case. You guys are just telling me something that I know isn't true. So you just have to be persistent with that as well. And finally they said, no, it's covered. Like, and I have USAA, and they're the ones that should be the most versed in doing this.
Right.
But again, this isn't something that they deal with. The average agent doesn't deal with this every day, and they just don't understand. So you just have to press and say, oh, this is exactly what I'm driving. And a lot of them have exemptions for vehicles for that will accommodate a disability. Like they'll say, oh, you need a rider. Well, I don't really need a rider. Look at the policy. If it has an exemption for a vehicle that allows for a driver with disabilities, then you don't need to pay extra.
Yeah, that is interesting. When we talked to our insurance, they said that they'll cover the cost of the equipment. You just need to like pay the policy for the actual like total price of the vehicle with modifications. So it's going to be like insuring a Porsche.
See, that's wrong too,
Is
because
it?
that's expensive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know your insurance company, but I would make sure that that's the correct answer.
Yeah.
Because if it's a part of a vehicle and it's the part of the vehicle is there so that it will help with person with a disability, that
Right.
then there might be an exemption that they're not aware of. Because yeah, if you have to pay to insure, a Porsche, that's a lot of money, especially if you're 18 years old. Like I couldn't afford, I don't think, his insurance, even if that were the case.
Right. Yeah. It would like at least double our insurance every 6 months or something. And Michigan already has the like highest auto insurance rates in the country, so that's nice.
So have I answered everybody's questions? Are there any other questions? Have you learned anything that you didn't know before? Or, is there anything else I can do? Again, if you reach out to me at Early-Onset Chapter at FSHDsociety.org or Arizona Chapter at FSHDsociety.org, if you have a specific question, I'll put it in the chat, and you can reach out to me, and I can try and help any way I can.
Yeah, so Allie, thanks for putting this on. I do have one question. I mean, this question is probably too late for me now, but I started the process, and having my independence is valuable enough that I'm willing to take a risk. I have no idea if I can pass the driving test. I mean, but you have to start the process. So, I mean, do you just take a leap of faith, or is there some more, I don't know.
Well, I don't want to get too personal, but why don't you think you can pass the driving test?
I mean, I just, who knows? I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe coordination. I mean, who knows? I've never done this before. I've driven before regular cars, but I don't know.
Well, I think, I don't think you should be discouraged and say you can't do it, because again, when you get the evaluation, they're going to tell you what modification you need to be successful. So they'll look at your physical capabilities and they'll say, okay, you may need a joystick driver, you may just need hand controls. And then once you try it out, then if they give you the correct modification, then you will have the coordination to do it. Like, again, my son drives with a joystick. He doesn't have the coordination or the muscle strength to grab, so I would say, yeah, don't count yourself out. Go get the evaluation, and they'll be able to tell you, based on your muscle strength, if the modification will work for you, or they'll fit a modification to work for you.
Right.
Does that make
So
sense?
yeah, I mean, basically, I tried out. It's not a joystick; they're hand controls. But the hand controls could be twist, pull, push, and all sorts of things. The car that the evaluator only had one type. And, you know, there could be accelerator on the left or accelerator on the right. And so, you know, so I'm getting all this stuff. I've gone past the point of, you know, no return, basically. So, you know, I just wanted to know if I was crazy to do that or if that's how you have to do
No,
it.
I say go for it. And they can change things around to fit whatever you need. If you're stronger, like if you're asymmetric, like so many FSH people are, and you're stronger on one side or the other, they can put the accelerator on your strong side. I mean, they can manipulate it 1,000 different ways, really. There's a lot of different ways they can manipulate it. So if they only had you try one thing that's kind of a generic, then they're doing you a disservice. They need to evaluate you and say, what really do you need? And then modify the card to meet your needs. And they can, and they,
Right.
you know, they should. And there's so many different ways to modify. I had no idea until I got into this, how many different ways that they can modify a vehicle. And they
Right.
can make it pretty custom to what you need.
Yeah, I mean, I know they can do all that, and that's what I've ordered, but you can't try it out ahead of time because, you know, the guy only had one configuration in his car that we did the evaluation. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I would say that they need to figure out a way to have you try out different things. Like, because I see what you're saying now, you're gonna buy a vehicle and you're not gonna be sure if you can drive it or not. I mean, that they should be able to bring in different vehicles or do something, you know, so that they know that it'll work for you based
right.
on your strength in the evaluation.
Yeah.
That is, that's what happened with me too. The driver's rehab evaluation place that I went to only had, like, they didn't even have a van with a ramp. They just had like a Buick with manual hand controls, and my triceps basically gone, so I couldn't push for the brake. And so she just recommended what she thinks will work, and that's what she put on the prescription, and that's what we're just ordering the vehicle. And in theory, rehab services are paying for that without me ever having tested it. I'm getting low power braking as well. So I don't know, wanted to put that
Well,
out there
again,
as well.
they're paying for the modification, and if you get the modification and you can't drive it, then they're gonna have to change it, right? I mean,
You'd hope
they're the
so.
ones paying for it. You paid for the vehicle, but they have to get it right, because then it's all for naught if you still can't get to work. So I don't know. Sam drove a vehicle with a joystick. They tried out different things. He drove a van with a joystick before we ordered it. And he learned how to
That's
drive
cool.
on that. So he knew he could do it. And they knew that he could do it before we invested our money and they invested their money. So, but if they're paying for it, that seems silly. And that's a waste of resources, I would think, if they're just kind of throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks. I hope that they have a more informed, you know, process than that. But
Yeah, you would hope so.
yeah. But
Well,
again, if you get it and then you can't use it, I would think that they would have to pay to change it.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's good to see your video on the joystick. So I'm pretty sure I could do that. I'm not so
Yeah.
sure I could do these other controls.
I
You know,
couldn't
like
do it.
Chris was saying, you know, to use your hand to step on the brakes, you know, I don't know if I can slam the brakes with my hands, you know, if I need to.
So it's you know, my son's been in a chair for a while, but you know, it's different in a car. It just drives differently, and he has to push forward to accelerate. So even when he puts it in reverse, he has to push forward. And that was a little bit of him, you know, having to learn that even if it's reverse, I go forward, back is brake. So he had to learn that, but he learned it pretty quickly. Again, he's young. Um, and you know, when you're young, you can learn things a lot quicker, but he got it pretty quickly, and he learned how to drive. So he had to learn how to drive and then how to drive the car. And he did very well. He did really well. So I would think it's just a matter of muscle memory and just, you know, once you learn, once you know, you know. But I think, you know, pretty much anybody could do it.
Yeah, I mean, at least young enough to have grown up with video games. So hopefully I could do it.
Right. And you've driven before, so you already know the rules of the road, and that's half the battle. It's just a matter of learning to manipulate the car. You learned how to manipulate a car the first time you learn how to drive, you can do it again.
Does he report that driving the car with the joystick is a lot like driving his wheelchair, other than the pushing forward to reverse thing?
No, I mean, yeah, I don't know, because again, a car moves differently than a chair. Like you can't just like when he's in his chair, he just whips it around. You can't do that in a car. He has to learn, he had to learn like the point turns and all those sorts of things, but he did, and he doesn't get in his car and try to drive it like his chair, and he doesn't get in his chair and try to drive it like his car. So he can differentiate between the two pretty easily.
Yeah, interesting.
Actually, in his driving test, did they make him parallel park?
I think they did. Yeah, I think he did parallel park, and and the other thing, because it's a side load, you know how handicap parking is. You can never find the ones and he backed into a parking spot because he couldn't go in forward with the ramp. So he just pulled forward and backed right in. I'm like, all right, he seems to be able to move the car around pretty well.
Yeah, no, that's great.
The only thing is at high speeds, the joystick gets a little bit touchy. In Arizona, the speed limit on the freeway is 75. So right now, he hasn't been on the freeway yet, and they recommend that he just stay on some 55, 65 roads for a while, because it does get touchy. Same thing when you're driving, a regular car, you're going 80 and you move the steering wheel a little bit, it doesn't take much. So he hasn't been at high speeds yet, but he'll get there, I think. And it's just kind of out of caution, just to make sure that he's good with everything, and he seems fine. He sneezed, because I was like, what if you sneeze and you got your hand on the joystick, you're gonna crash? But he sneezed and he was fine. So we got that behind us. So any other questions? Or I hope, if you're in this process, I hope everybody who needs a car gets one, because we got to keep our independence and keep working, right? We're capable.
Wow.
And don't give up.
Yeah. Hi, Allie. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
That was so valuable. We have been recording this, so and I hope you can share your slides. I'll make a blog post and get it out there, and I bet people will have other questions that they can post on the blog. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And again, if you have any other questions, if something else occurs to you, shoot them to me, and I'll answer them the best I can. Or again, I know a lot of people that work in voc rehab just because of my job, so I can get those questions answered for you, again, with the Arizona stamp on them, but I think they're all pretty similar. Yeah. And I'm going to put my email in the chat real quick. So, all right. So you just copy those down, and I'll be happy to help you out where I can.
Great. So what's in store for next month?
Well, we're going to the Pediatric Summit, as you know, at the end of the month. Well, actually, next week, I think. So I'm sure we will have lots and lots to share from that. I hope that we do. I will keep you posted about on the outcomes of that, and hopefully we'll have some good guests that will help kind of let all the parents know about what we're doing and what came out of that meeting.
This is a big deal. It's a landmark
It is a big
meeting.
deal. It's a huge deal. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Again, if you have questions, let me know. And I hope you all have a wish you all safe driving, safe adaptive driving in your vehicles.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Have a
Night.
good night.